story time about how I pooped on my boyfriend's bed because he cheated on me with his ex. Disclaimers is not my story time, it's sending me to Instagram. I know that it's so gross, but I think it's justified and you guys are gonna agree with me. I met this man's at the doctor. At start, I know. Came in with a bad cold thinking I had COVID, but it was just a virus. He was there with his mom. Sitting in the waiting room and he keeps looking at me. Mind you, my nose is dripping and I feel absolutely disgusting, so I thought he was just like judging me. After about 20 minutes, he comes over to me and hands me his phone. Says, put your number in. I laughed and I was like, are you for real? And he's like, yeah, I'd love to take you out on a date. And his mom looks over at me and waves at me. They both tricked me. Fast forward to about 6 months. Our relationship was pretty good. I would say the only problem we had was that he let his mother control his life. I mean, clearly, because he's such a mama's boy. But I tried not to let this deter me. I mean, I'm also close with my mom, but she doesn't try to control everything about my life. At this point, I had heard about his ex, and all he ever said was that they had a good relationship and that they were still amicable. To me, it was a good sign. He never spoke badly about her, but he never told me about why they broke up. All of his friends and I go to a bar one night, and there's this girl there, and this girl targets me the entire night. She sits next to me, is super nice, and we chat. I'm thinking at that point that she's just another friend. But then my boyfriend's best friend turns to me and says, you know that's his ex, right? At that point, I'm like, oh my god, no way. There's one thing about me that you need to know. I am not a jealous person. I am very, very secure. What I do require is complete respect. I look over at my boyfriend and I'm like, oh my gosh, you didn't tell me that this was your ex. He just laughs it off like nothing. Then his ex tells me, oh, we should go get lunch tomorrow. And I, of course, say yes. I mean, I didn't see a reason for me to say no. Following day, I show up to the freaking restaurant, only to wait for her for an hour. She's an hour late. Luckily, I was doing work on my phone, so I kind of got distracted. But when she finally shows up, she starts talking trash about my boyfriend. And she's like, I need to spill all the tea. And here's where she insinuated that he had stolen money from her. He was not faithful. And that all he cared about was his mom. I was stunned. And to be honest, I did not believe her. I told her that I would need to experience those things for myself to be able to confirm it, but that I was sorry that that was her experience with him. A few seconds later, I look down and she gets a message from my boyfriend. This is when she says, oh, and by the way, he's been seeing me for 3 weeks. And she tells me that every time he says he can't hang out with me, it's because he's hanging out with her. The reason that she was an hour late is because she was at his apartment. This is when I was really sick to my stomach, like literal diarrhea. She apologized and started to cry as if she's the victim. And she hands me a key to his apartment and tells me that I should go over there and speak to him. When I show up, he's not there. Start looking around the apartment to find some evidence, and sure enough, I find her disgusting dirty ass thong in his hamper. Go to the bed, pull off the sheets, and there's a used you-know-what. And like I said, my stomach was already rumbling. I didn't even think about it twice. Got on top of the bed, pulled my pants down, squatted, and did my business. It was watery and it was everywhere. I cleaned myself off and left the apartment. 2 hours later, he calls and tells me you'll never believe what happened. He tells me how he showed up to his apartment and somebody had taken a shit on the bed. So I convinced him that it was probably his ex, that she had told me that they had been having an affair. He swears up and down that she's telling a lie, that all she wants is for us to break up. So here's what I did. I hung up the phone and blocked him on everything. A liar will always be a liar, and a cheater will always be a cheater. Guess what? A few weeks later, they're engaged. Why would he waste my time like that? Self-care sister out.
Story time about how this guy was cheating on his girlfriend with me. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade. And the one day one of my friends, Josh, decided to expose this kid named Caden because this guy Caden posted on his Snapchat story, anybody who's 14 and younger, unadd me. I find it so weird that you little girls are swiping up on my stories calling me cute. So my best friend Josh decides to expose this man and he's like, weren't you just hanging out with a 12-year-old the other day? Make it make sense. So, I only add Caden because I was going to tell him that he's gross and disgusting for hanging out with 12-year-olds. But after he sent me a picture of his face saying hi, I immediately fell in love with this man. I know this looks bad. Trust me. I know. Anyways, when I started talking to this kid, I really thought that he was on some fuckboy type shit. He was actually super sweet and really kind.
Bruh.
Like, he never asked me for nudes or anything. He also told me that he was single, so him and I start flirting. And y'all, I really thought that this man was about to be my husband. Now, of course, I low-key doubted him a little bit, so I ended up taking screenshots of every one of our messages. Well, him and I had never actually met in person, but we did have plans to meet up that weekend. So a few days before him and I are supposed to meet up, all of a sudden he literally went ghost. I didn't hear from him all day. And then when I go to Snapchat him, bro has me blocked on almost everything. He had me blocked on Instagram as well, but he had 2 accounts on Instagram and he forgot to block me on the one. And Instagram really snitched on this man because when I clicked on his Instagram, it had the suggested accounts. Some girl with a profile picture of him and her popped up. And she had their date in her bio. They have been dating for a whole fucking year.
Don't be shocked. You're shocked? You're shocked?
So obviously I'm gonna tell her that her man was cheating on her, but whenever I add her on Snapchat, she immediately sends me a message that says, if this is about Caden, I don't want to hear it. So instead of talking to her about Caden, I literally just sent her all of the screenshots from these past 2 weeks that him and I have been talking. The only thing I said after that was, he's been cheating on you with me. So then she literally just responds with a video of them and she's like, okay, thank you. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I personally wouldn't stay with him, but to each their own. Anyways, so fast forward, they're still together and I'm still blocked on everything.
My husband humiliated me at our wedding by shoving my face into our cake. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Also, I have COVID and I was told that I need to rest, so I'm not filming. I have to repeat content. I'm sorry. I love you guys though. Before we got engaged, my husband and I had only known each other for 3 months. We actually met when we were traveling, so we didn't even live in the same country. This was my first mistake. After we met, he asked me to come visit him again, and I did. I didn't ask him to come visit me. He asked me. Did I pay for my own flight? Yes. Did I split the bill with him? Yes. But here's the thing. He was doing everything else right. He was treating me well, buying me gifts, giving me so much attention, acting like he was already my husband. We got engaged 3 months later and none of my friends or my family knew him. And we decided to have a destination wedding. This meant the only time my parents met him was at our wedding, and my friends. Before our wedding, he and I had not lived together. I was the one that was going to visit him all the time. In preparation for our wedding, I really wanted this one specific makeup artist. And both of our parents decided to pay for the wedding. Our budget for the wedding was $80,000, so it was a lot. The makeup artist I wanted was $3,000. I met with the makeup artist twice. This way we could try out 2 styles of makeup. We finally landed on one that I loved. The hairstylist charged me another $3,000. So my husband knew how much effort I put into my makeup and my hair. Before the wedding, I made him swear that he would not shove my face into the cake. And he agreed. Fast forward to cutting the cake. He pushed my face into the cake so hard, I almost got knocked out. Everyone ran over to me. Part 2 is up. My husband humiliated me at our wedding by violently shoving my face into the cake. Claiming this is not my story time. Also, I have COVID and I'm repeating content because I was told I need to rest. I'm sorry. That's when he grabbed my neck so hard and pushed my face into the cake. He did it so violently that I almost got knocked out. And I was able to pull myself away from the cake. I started falling backward and that's when my family started running up to me. Before I could fall, my father caught me midair. What was my husband doing? Just looking at me. That's when he yells out, "You are so dramatic." No one, and I mean no one, not even his parents, thought that it was funny. Everyone at the wedding surrounded me asking if I was okay. Even the servers offered a chair and ice. Luckily, my bridesmaids took me to the bathroom, and when I saw the state of my face and my hair, I burst into tears. $6,000 down the drain. $6,000 I was only able to enjoy a third of. The night wasn't even halfway through at that point. That's when they washed my hair and my face. I still decided to make the best of it. I spent the rest of the night dancing without makeup and hair. Did he apologize? Kind of. He said, "My bad." Didn't expect everyone to react like that. And he actually complained that now he was the bad guy. The following day, my parents convinced me to get the wedding annulled. But now he's almost my ex. I was about to leave my family to move to his country. A man that is violent towards you under the guise of a joke actually hates you. He wants to hurt you. Self-care sister out.
Storytime about how I got pregnant by my boyfriend's younger brother and he still doesn't know. So a little background information, I am 19 years old and I'm in college. So my boyfriend and I have been dating for about 2 years and we're going to call him Josh. The 2 years that we've been dating have been super rocky because he would try to hook up with other girls. Well, no, actually he wouldn't try. He would hook up with other girls. And then, him and I would break up and then we would get back together. Just your usual toxic relationship. The main reason why I kept going back to him was because he was super popular. And this made me feel like I was never going to find anybody better than him, so on and so forth. Now, Josh's brother is 21 years old, and somehow, someway, him and I started hooking up. Right around after the time I found out that my boyfriend was cheating on me with my cousin. Yes, my cousin. I'm saying that like I'm not hooking up with his brother. Anyways. Well, one day I realized that I haven't got my period in 2 months, so I took a pregnancy test, and it came back positive. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how I got pregnant by my boyfriend's younger brother and he still doesn't know. So like I said, my boyfriend cheated on me with my cousin and somehow that led to me hooking up with his younger brother. Well, fast forward, one day I realized that I haven't gotten my period in 2 months, so I took a pregnancy test and it came back positive, of course. And the first thing that I did was go to Josh's brother because him and I were hooking up way more than my boyfriend and I were within the past few months. Well, we both came to the conclusion that I should just tell my boyfriend that it's his and see what happens from there. So I told my boyfriend I'm pregnant and he was super happy, gave me this whole speech about how he's going to be a better boyfriend for me and the baby, which in simpler terms pretty much means, yay babe, I'm going to stop cheating on you since you're pregnant, but only because you're pregnant. So now my boyfriend is raising my 1-year-old daughter who he thinks is his, and I'm still hooking up with his brother. Storytime about how I found out that my best friend screwed my boyfriend. So a little background information. This happened whenever I was between 16 and 21 years old, and I was a sophomore in high school. During the summer just before school started, my boyfriend Ryan moved to town. But sadly, whenever he moved here, his mom passed away, so he ended up missing the first 2 weeks of school. Fast forward, Ryan comes to school and he ends up becoming best friends with my guy best friend, and him and I had a bunch of classes together, so we would talk all the time. Obviously, this led to me having a crush on him. So him and I end up dating, and that's whenever we switch lunch tables to sit with my other friends. And then fast forward about 2 months into Ryan and I's relationship, my ex came to my house the one night and he SA'd me. The next day, I told my boyfriend what happened and he agreed that it wasn't my fault, but he said he would need some time to get over it. Fast forward, we end up moving on and we did the nasty a few times. And then my best friend Maddie told me the only reason why he did the nasty with me was because he felt like I was more experienced than him. So I end up breaking up with him because I felt like he deserved better than me. He ended up never speaking to me, but later on I heard a rumor that somebody saw Ryan and Maddie together. So I confront her about it and she told me that she was just comforting him after what I did to him. Isn't it funny how there are those friends who go to comfort your ex during the breakup instead of you? A little sus if you ask me. Fast forward 5 years later, he comes into the place that I work, and my work best friend Ashley gives my number to his friend to give to Ryan. So I texted him that night, and then I woke up the next morning to a text that says, "Who is this?" And then over that weekend, we ended up reconnecting. Then a month later, I got kicked out of my house and I moved in with him. And plot twist, 8 months later, one thing led to another. He proposed to me. And then 5 months later, we also ended up moving into a bigger apartment. Well, I ended up buying him a new phone, and that is whenever I saw text messages between him and Maddie. And they weren't just messages. These messages were very spicy. Also, this is while she was in a relationship with a freshman while we were seniors. I forgave him for lying because obviously we weren't in a relationship, but it's pretty effed up that that was my best friend. And obviously Maddie and I are not friends anymore.
My best friend cheated on her man, so I went and I told him. Am I the asshole for doing that? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. My bestie's always been a bitch. She does whatever she wants, whenever she wants. Literally nobody can tell her otherwise. Now, her and I usually get along all the time. My bestie has a bad temper on her. She can be very judgmental, and every time she starts telling me what to do or what I shouldn't do, I would just do it. But about a year ago, I started defending myself and talking back. And she does not like this. If she's this way with me, can you imagine how she's with her man? She controls every single aspect of the relationship. She even tells him when he can go to the gym, who he can be friends with, where he can go by himself. I mean, it's unbelievable that she's been able to retain this man. The problem is that he's just so in love with her. You see, he's like a 7 and she's like a 9. But he's a really good guy and she's taken advantage of that. A little while ago, she pressured me into going on a double date. And the guy she set me up with was a trans man. He didn't even have the decency to tell me when I got there. I was stunned and actually couldn't speak. After the date, my bestie confessed that she had hooked up with a trans guy. How dare she do that to her man? Started seeing a side of my bestie I don't like. So I took matters into my own hands. Go to part 2. My bestie cheated on her man, so I went and I told him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. After she told me that she had been cheating on her boyfriend with that trans guy, the one that she tried to set me up on a date with, I couldn't believe it. So I started questioning her. I asked her when they met, how long they've been seeing each other, and that's when she told me that she's been cheating on her boyfriend for the entirety of the relationship. A week after she became his girlfriend, she started hooking up with the other guy. I told her that she was not right for doing what she was doing. If you're wondering why I'm so upset at her for cheating on her man, let me tell you why. Her boyfriend is completely devoted to her. As soon as he's finished at work, he tries to go see her every single day, constantly texting her throughout the day, even calls her at night just to say goodbye. And because he started helping her out with the rent, she's able to live by herself without roommates. He also started paying for her car insurance and her cell phone bill. He even offered to pay for her nails. I've met some shitty ass men in my life and he is not one of them. That's when I told her that what she was doing was fucked up and she needed to stop. When she got up in my face and told me that I needed to stay out of her business. She had never spoken to me like that or even gotten in my face like that before. Something is up with her and I can't put my finger on it. And I told her she was being disrespectful to me and her boyfriend. She almost came at me, but she stopped herself, thank God. I went straight over to her boyfriend's job and told him everything. I don't think it's fair that he needs to be paying for her bills or treating her like a queen while she's running around with another dude. No, thank you. When I told him, he started to cry. He asked me if I was 1000% sure and I said yes because she had just confessed it to me. And now I have bigger problems. He went and broke up with her and now my bestie's coming at me. She's getting people to bully me online. She even had her brother follow me for an entire day. When I tried to reach out, she blocked me. She actually broke one of my car windows. What the heck should I do? Did I do wrong or was I right?
Story time about how my boyfriend was seeing another girl behind my back. So, a little background information. I was living with my dad and I had just started a new school. And I became really good friends with this group of kids. And in our friend group, there was this boy who we're going to call Alex. And him and I hit it off like right away. We had been talking for 2 months. And by the way, during this whole time, his friends were telling me how much he loved me and how much he wanted to be with me. So eventually, him and I started dating. And of course, like any other tragic love story, I had to move far away because I had to go live with my mom, blah, 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 blah. But since I would visit my dad for the holidays, him and I would still be able to see each other sometimes, which is pretty good for a long distance relationship, especially when you're in school. So I told him about how I had to move. And he was really sad, but he said that I can trust him. Red flag number 1, because why would you say that in the first place? There should be no reason on why I have to, quote, trust you to be loyal when I'm away. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend was seeing another girl behind my back. So like I said, I told him that we were going to have to do long distance and he was sad, but then he said that he could trust me. And like I said before, why the hell would I have to trust you? Because you should just be loyal in general, duh. So I'm like, hey, I want to spend time with you before I leave. Can we hang out? And he was like, oh, sorry, I have plans, but we can hang out later tonight. So I was like, okay, whatever. And a few hours go by. I never get a text from him or a call, nothing. So I text him and he's like, sorry, I forgot. So I'm really sad right now, but I forgave him. Quick note here, ladies, if he wanted to, he would. He would have canceled his plans if he really wanted to see you. Anyway, so I move and fast forward 2 to 3 weeks. And Alex and I literally have only been texting, no calls, nothing like that. So I'm talking to one of his friends and one of his friends tells me that he's been talking to this other girl. And he's been telling everybody that he's been wanting to break up with me for weeks because he wants to date her instead, like for part 3.
Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I'm sending me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, wow, you're growing into your body, or wow, you got great hips. He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, oh, you know how he is. So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dressed so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. That's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting. And that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13 and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.
story time about my worst trip off LSD. So one of the kids in my friend group was about to leave for Arizona, and we would always talk about how we need to trip together before he leaves. And anytime that I would trip off acid, I would go to my one plug. Well, he ran out, so we had to go to somebody else. And I've never tried this kid's stuff before. I just said, fuck it, YOLO. Which should not have been my motto at the time, but it was. So that night, we're in the car, and one of our friends is driving because he's sober, obviously. And before I put the tab on my tongue, I started to get really nervous. And I have never felt like that before I've taken acid. But I kind of just said fuck it, and I put it on my tongue. So we go pick up 2 more people that I'm not really close with. So then we make our way over to our other friend's apartment. And I'm kind of feeling it, but not really. But then as soon as we walk into that apartment, I start tripping balls. And you know, everything was going good. But then my dumb ass decided to look in the fucking mirror. And as soon as I look in the mirror, I see myself smile back at me, like for part 2. Okay, part 2. So like I said, I look in the mirror and I see myself smiling back at me. And that's whenever everything went south so quick. I sat on the bed, tried to pull myself together because I didn't want to make a fucking scene in front of everybody. But then I got caught in this fucking loop. And if you don't know what the loop is, then I'm going to tell you what it is. It's basically where you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I started looking around at everybody and it looked like their faces were melting. One of my friends got up off his chair, walked to the other side of the room, and I watched him do that. But when I looked back over at the fucking chair, he was still sitting there. So I looked at my one friend that was sober, who I was actually really close with, and I think he saw the look in my eye and he was like, do you want to leave now? And I just shook my head, yeah, like I could not deal with that shit anymore. So we go to his car and then we drive to my boyfriend's house. Because I could not go home. I would have got crucified. Well, we get in the house and as soon as his mom sees me, she knows that something's wrong. Like for part 3. Okay, part 3. So like I said, I walked in and she knew that something was wrong with me right away. Because she was like, oh, I have a letter from your boyfriend. And usually I would run up, grab it, read it really quickly. Because I would only get like 1 letter a week. But instead I ran downstairs because her face was fucking melting. So 5 minutes later, she has to come downstairs and help me get dressed into my pajamas because I forgot how to dress myself. I didn't want to be left alone that night, so my friend stayed in the basement with me. So he went and tried to go to sleep. But he couldn't because I was watching Butterfly Effect for 8 hours straight. Like, that was the only thing that could calm me down. But I still don't even know all the freaking words to it, which is weird. Like, he would try to change the video and somehow I end up back to Butterfly Effect. And then he tried to kiss me. So he left the next morning because he had to go to work, which was at like 11 a.m. And I took this tab at 8 p.m. the day before. So I was getting texts like, where are you? You're supposed to be home now. So I had to go home and act normal in front of everybody while I'm still tripping balls. And I also got grounded for coming home late because I could not come home at the right time because I was tripping so hard. And this lasted for about 24 hours.